In this video, we'll discover the following findings: the importance of utilizing the latest ISOs available, and the importance of patching devices with the latest patching releases with any ISO that we use. We'll also find out the importance of security baselines and keeping them updated. The objective in this white hat experiment is to exploit an unpatched 2012 server with an older ISO with the vulnerability of MS17-010, also known as WannaCry. The following tasks will be completed in this white hat experiment. We'll scan the subnet to ascertain devices, open ports, OS versions and vulnerabilities. We'll scan the target host to determine if the exploits can run. We will then test the exploit and run it. We'll then execute the command prompt on the target and perform the following: create a folder, kill the notepad task that is open, and restart the server. The devices that we'll be utilizing for this white hat experiment are two virtual machines installed on Java Oracle VM, and they will be on their own internal network. They will be virtual machines. The penetrations device on the left will be an operating system of Linux Kali, the IP address of 10.10.10.20, and we'll be utilizing the tools Nmap and Metasploit, which come pre-installed with the Linux Kali operating system. The target device on the right will be a Microsoft Windows Server 2012 R2 operating system. The name of the device is testdc01 on the domain coffee.local. This is the only device on that domain, and needless to say, it hosts all the FSMO roles. The IP address will be 10.10.10.22, and we will be exploiting the MS17-010 vulnerability, which is also utilized and known as WannaCry, which was the WannaCry ransomware outbreak from a few years prior to this video being made. We'll also be utilizing an older ISO that contains no patching applied after. To start off with, I'm going to open up the terminal within Linux Kali as root. Now I'm also going to display to you the Windows Server 2012 DC that I have in place. So as we can see, it's called testdc01 on the domain coffee.local, and we have the IP address of 10.10.10.22 here. I also have a notepad file here called Hello World. I'm going to leave this open so that I can kill the notepad task later off in the video once I exploit the vulnerability. Back into Linux Kali, what we need to do is first run a scan utilizing Nmap across the network or the subnet to determine the vulnerabilities that we have in place. So what I'm doing is doing this scan, and this scan will take a minute or two depending on how many devices are on the network. In this test environment we only have one, so it shouldn't take too long, but what I will do is stop this video and I'll continue the video once the scan is completed. Okay, and the scan has completed. Now I'll just take you through what it's found on this one particular host. So it provides a lot of information. And what we can see in particular here is the open ports on the device, the service that it hosts, and the version of it. Now we can see from this information by looking at it, if you've been in the IT field for some time, you can tell that this is an Active Directory server. It also provides the operating system version, so Microsoft Windows Server 2012 or Windows Server 2012 R2, and we can also note the name. Now what it does do as well is it scans the vulnerabilities, and as we can see, it's done these first two and they failed or didn't come back with any information for whatever reason, but vulnerability MS17-010 has come back as vulnerable. So what this means is if an intruder was on the network and scanned this device, they would be able to penetrate this device utilizing this vulnerability. They would be able to exploit the service, and in this particular instance it utilizes SMBv1 with some vulnerability within code execution. So we've established that we can, as white hackers, penetrate or exploit this device. So now we have to follow through with it. Now I'll begin with this utilizing the Metasploit console, and I'll explain what I'm doing as I'm going along. So the first thing I need to do is load up the console, and this can take a few seconds. Also, one thing to note, the scan for that one device took 163 seconds. So depending on how many devices you are looking to scan on your network, it can take some time. Also depends on the compute memory, basically the beef of your device that you're utilizing for scans. So what I'm going to do is, first off, I'm going to load up the vulnerability or the exploit. Okay, so I've loaded that up. I now need to set the hosts. So in this example, I'm going to be using the domain controller with the IP address of 10.10.10.22. Now we run the exploit, which basically tests to see if it can be exploited. And as we can see, it's confirmed that it is exploited. So now we're going to use the actual exploit and penetrate the device. Okay, what it will do, because we aren't configuring a payload, it defaults to Windows Metaprether reverse TCP, and that's fine for this particular experiment. We then need to set the host again, but we use rhost instead of rhosts. Now the next thing we do is set the process injection process that we will use. So we'll be using dllhost.exe. The final thing we do is set the target architecture. Great. Then we run it. Now what we can see at the bottom here is, we'll start from the top. So it starts a reverse TCP handler on the IP from our IP address here on this particular port. Then it gets into the target, executes the payload. Then what it does is it starts the Metaprether session. So if you get this with the session opened, that means that it was a success. But what we need to do now is load the command prompt. Let me try that again. Typo there. Great. So now we're in the command prompt. What I'm going to do now is show you that this is the target that we are in, test DC01. Great. We can see test DC01. So let's go here, and we are going to create a directory here, and we are going to be calling it White Hat Down Under. And as we can see, this directory was created, which displays that we have elevated permissions on the device. Now what I'm going to do is kill off the task of Notepad. Okay, so we can see Notepad here. The PID is 2168, so we are going to kill that. Okay, so it looks like that's killed the process. If we jump back on, we can see that process is gone. Now the final thing I'm going to do is restart the computer. Okay, I'm going to exit this because the session will die anyways, but as we can see, the device is restarting.